Hi, here we are again. Another Sunday, another workshop. Today we're all going to talk about supplemental essay questionnaires, all about it. Um, it's a lot, supplemental essays, on top of everything you're doing for for all of the applications. In addition to that, to do an essay just for one school. Um, can be a lot. It can really feel like a lot. And so, anyway, you know what? Actually, before I start talking, can you please verify that you can actually see and hear me okay? That'll be very helpful so that I just know that I'm not sleep peeking into the nothingness either. But anyhow, so yeah, so thinking about supplemental essay questionnaires, a lot of people feel kind of overwhelmed because it's like, well, there's already this. Even if you don't look at supplemental essay questionnaires, applications is a lot. You have to write the essay, you have to get your letters, you have to do your CV and your CAPID. Everything is a lot. And on top of that, to think that some schools have essays that, they want you to write just to apply to that one school can just feel frustrating, upsetting, like a seriously kind of situation, right? Like, on top of all else I have to do to apply. I e Okay, I think it's working again. Yeah, anyway, so it can just feel like a lot, and, so a lot of people do wonder, like, "Okay, how important really is this? Like, how much time do I really have to spend on this?" Um because like, oh my God, right? So, and it's totally understandable. I get this question all the time. Like, how important is it to the supplemental essay questionnaires? So, before we really talk about like how to go about doing it, I first want you to think about this. Um, when it asks you to submit something, um, two things are kind of clear. Number one is that they care. They care about whatever essay questionnaire is that they want you to answer. They've asked you because they actually do care about that. Um, what does that mean? It would mean that that answer could change, like have a little bit of a weight, at least a little bit, on whether you would get interviewed or not. Because, they care. And that's why they are, that's why they've asked you to send it in, because when they ask you to write something like an essay, on the flip side of that, what that means is that they're utilizing their admissions committee's time and attention and resources to review them. And they get a lot of applications. So from this viewpoint of whoever is reviewing all of this, first, she or he is already overwhelmed with all of the things she or he has to uh, review. Like, think just stacks of applications that they have to go through and be like, okay, yes, interview, maybe interview, no interview. Just if you kind of like simplify, they have to go through this whole process of like, okay, this is a yes, this is a maybe, this is a no for every single application. And that is a lot. Um, but they are saying on top of that, that they will um, review your supplemental essay questions. So that does really mean that it is important to them. So what I say it say to applicants really is this. I'm a huge proponent of applying to a lot of programs. And that's a probably a conversation for a whole different time, but I am. But when I say like apply to lots of schools and like don't limit your options, just don't close any doors before you actually get the acceptance. That's the time to close doors. That's the time to choose, not before you apply. But anyway, when we say that, like when you actually apply, you you need to apply to the places where you can put in a decent amount of attention too. Like you need to be able to um yeah, like you need to be able to put in an application that that they would kind of consider, like you don't want to, let's say, apply to a lot of places, but do that very half-heartedly. Like you want to make sure that you have a good personal statement. You want to make sure that your CV and CAPIT is good and all of that, right? And in goes in the same line of you want to make sure that the supplemental essay is good because a couple of issues I see all of the time. Number one is essay in CAPIT is pretty decently done. Like, okay, good. Like things flow, things are cohesive and all of that. And then look at somebody's supplemental essay questionnaires and it sounds like a completely different person. Like there are grammar errors and there are syntax errors and it doesn't even read like it's written by the same person. It happens a lot because a lot of people would go out and get professional help for their SOP and CV and CAPID, but they don't do that for their supplemental essays. And I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? The reason it's like money. So, like when you get help with your SOP and CV, that affects all of your applications. It's like a really good bang for your buck. Versus if you get help, somebody's professional help just to edit an essay questionnaire, those answers only go to one school, and there never is a guarantee that that one school will call you, like never. And so, a lot of people shy away from doing that. And so, what ends up happening is when the committee receives it, something is very, very clearly off. Think about just good writing in one and then just not at the same level. So that would make that receiver, whoever's reading it, think one of a few scenarios. One is, oh, this person must not have written her personal statement herself. Um, you know and even if, let's say, you wrote the most of it and just got it edited, that person doesn't know. That person might as well think that like you got it ghost written, like you didn't do anything for it. Like you just don't know how far the assumption is going to go. And then or they'll think that they did not really care about the essay questionnaire enough to even put in the attention it needed to be a good or decent um, essay. So when that happens, what you're basically saying is, I don't really care about your school. Like I didn't care about your school enough to pay attention to the essay questionnaire that was a requirement for application. And that just is not a good presentation. And for them, it can be like, oh, no, you don't care? Okay, well, there are plenty of other candidates that do care. So I guess I don't care about you either. It just kind of becomes like that. If you think about this whole application kind of process, kind of like dating, a lot of times the metaphor fits quite well. Like if, somebody that somebody says they're interested in you, like AKA applying. However, their actions just seem otherwise, then you're just gonna be like, okay, never mind. I got all these other options. I got all these other options. I'm not gonna waste my time over here either. So, okay, goodbye. So I just want you to know that what it can look like from the receiver's end when the quality or the writing style or the grammar, just when things are not at the same level, that's the impression that they can get, and that can be pretty bad. Like, just think about this. Let's say you're helping somebody, um, learn how to do something. Let's say, um draw a picture. Let's just say you're really good at drawing trees and somebody says like, "Hey, can you help me like learn how to paint the tree?" And you go like, "Sure, I'll be happy to." And so you show them how to do it, and then like they go and basically uh do several paintings, and then they show it to you, and one is just clearly not done by them. Like, it's just like the quality is very, very inconsistent, to the point where just by first glance, you're like, "Okay, this was not done by the same person. Either you got professional help over there, and this is your true level of writing, which is not good, or this was your like, what the good stuff was your level, and you just didn't care about that one over there, which is a supplemental essay questionnaire, So, like, those are just the things that can happen in this whole situation, and so, like, it's very important to know what it is that you're dealing with, because you're presenting your whole self with a few pages of paper. That is all. That is going to the committee's paper desk to represent you as a candidate, and from there, it either is a yes or a no. Like that. I mean, not yes or no in terms of like accepted or not accepted, but it's either a yes or a no in terms of like interview or no interview. Um, and so, yeah, so that's that. So that's kind of how it can look like. And so when when anything brings up a red flag in somebody's application, the chances of that person getting an interview is just reduced drastically. You don't want any red flags. I mean, they have plenty of applicants to choose from, plenty. So I usually say, like, look, if you just cannot pay the attention that an essay deserves to be streamlined with the rest of your application, then maybe you just don't apply to that school, because it's kind of like, what's the point? Like, if you did a good job on the other things but didn't do a good job on their supplemental essay questionnaires, in my mind, it's like that's a huge red flag from the school's perspective. Um, and if you can't pay attention to this school, like if you only have, let's say, 10 hours to work on supplemental essay questionnaires overall, and you want to apply to maybe 10 schools that have supplementals, but that's like 1 hour per school, which is not enough, then maybe you drop a few schools there so that you can do better at the schools that you really are going to apply to, just to do a better job with your overall presentation of your essay. Okay, so I just wanted to first get that out of the way in terms of what it really means for the school. Like, what do supplemental essay questionnaires, what is the significance of it from the program's perspective? Because that's the perspective that applicants don't have, right? So yeah, that's that. Okay, so that out of the way, what do we have to do to write a good personal, like a supplemental essay questionnaire? Like, how do we have to write it? There are a few things to really pay attention to in terms of how to craft your response. You want to make sure that your entire application is clearly looking like it's coming from one person. Um, and that was the issue, the cohesiveness that I talked about, but also the content. So a lot of people will kind of be concerned about like, oh, like the answers to the supplemental essay questionnaires have already kind of like partly been addressed in let's say the personal statement or something like that, right? Or the CV and the CAPED, like it's redundant. Like, why are they, like, what am I supposed to write there? It is okay if things are repeated, because it's not, what you're doing is you're reinforcing who you are as an applicant. If nothing was redundant throughout your application, it's actually more a bit of an issue, because that makes them think, who is this candidate? Like, what type of person is it? If they even take the time to think about it. Um, by the time they go through and look through your entire application, you want them to have a good grasp on you, a good understanding of you. And that's not just going to come by mentioning like all the things about you just once and having no repetition throughout. It is actually going to come from, let's just say, your long-term goal is to be an endodontist and you've spent some time assisting at an endo office and you have an endo recommendation letter and you did some, like, let's just say, endo preceptorship program, and like, see this redundancy. It's like endo here, endo there, endo there, endo there. That is what makes it them really, like, that's what helps you drive the point home to them that, like, oh, this really is a candidate that is very interested in endo. Like it's redundancy. And so, but if you say that over there on your SOP and CV, but it's not mentioned, if it is an appropriate question, like all the schools questions are wildly different from one another, so that it's not always appropriate to mention that. But if it is mentioned over there and that is your candidacy, and it can be slash should be incorporated into, if it makes sense to mention it here, and your only concern is that, well, like, I talked about it so much over there, don't worry about it. Please do be redundant. Say it again, because yeah, like, it is actually a good thing to say it again. Okay. And you certainly do not want to contradict yourself between your SOP and your supplemental. It sounds like a really simple, basic, dumb thing to do. Why would anybody do that? But it happens. So, and that situation would happen often when somebody's just like, okay, what am I supposed to write here? What do they want to hear? Like, if you're approaching a question like that, and this happens in interview preparation all the time too. Like, what's the right answer to the supplemental essay? Well, there's no right answer to the supplemental essay question. Just like there was no one right way to write your SOP. There were like lots of different things you could have, or routes that you could have taken to write your SOP, but like you had to choose the one, right? It's the same with the all of the essays. Like SOP essays are generally pretty open-ended. But anyway, yeah, so you don't, like, always keep your general candidacy theme in mind and answer the supplemental essay questionnaires, like, before you jump outward to be like, okay, what's the right answer? Like, how do I approach this? Go inward first. Okay, what is it? And I know, like, sometimes essay question is like, okay, like, why should we choose you? Kind of like Boston has the question of, like, I forgot what the exact wording is, but it's basically, what are you going to bring to this school, and like, why should we choose you? And honestly, your answer could be, I don't really care. I just want one acceptance, and you're just one of the the many schools that I'm applying to. And quite frankly, if I go anywhere, I don't really care. But you know what? Like, in this case, you have to really be like, okay, what is it? And really think a little bit deeper. Most people, I will tell you what most people do when they encounter, let's say, that question, or a question similar to that, like, why do you want to come to our school? This kind of stuff. Most of the times, the answer is one of, like, these variations: good technology, good patient pool, you're a great school, maybe you have good research and community outreach. Like, it comes from that. So nothing wrong with writing it that way, because most of the time it is true. Most of the schools that have these international dentist programs, you got to know that they are actually really good schools. They're able to run this program because they've reached a certain level of stability in their education. Like, a lot of programs, like dental schools, don't have it. And that does not necessarily mean that they're a bad school. Like, but to run this program, they had to have had that, like, extra bandwidth or attention to be like, all right, our traditional dental school program is running well and smoothly, and things are at a decent place. What else can we do? And then it's like, okay, like, maybe you can do an international dentist program. So to be able to, offer this program, they are at a decently good place as a school. So, like, all of those things, those general things that I just rattled off, they are true. At the same time, they're very, very generic. They're not like the most horrible thing to write at all. I'm not saying that, but to go beyond that often does require a little bit more thinking. Like, for instance, I was just because, like, think about their point of view, right? They read so many of this exact same essay questionnaire. Like, every single person that applies to this school has to write an answer to that. And usually it's going to be one of those five or whatever, like options that I just presented to you: community service, technology, patient pool, whatever. That's like what they're talking about in terms of why your school is so great. And that certainly, I'm pretty certain that whatever school you're applying to is really genuinely great in all of those areas. I'm not saying that that is not true at all, but I'm only pointing out the fact that every single person applying is writing this essay, and most of the people are going to be writing one of those themes that I just told you in some capacity or another. So it's just something to be like, oh, okay, like, is there anything else, right? And that's where some people go like, okay, like, how do I find more in-depth information about a school? And honestly, the best real way to do that is by talking to current students. If you have, the means to somehow reach that, don't always have that up, right? Like, me, for instance, back in the day, like, I didn't have anybody in any schools. I was completely a loner. Like, I didn't know anybody in school, like, nothing. So I had no connections or anything like that. But so you just do your best in the situation that you are in. But if you do have those connections, then it's kind of like you could ask them like, okay, what do you think about your school? What is your favorite thing about your school? And maybe they will give you some insights that are just slightly outside of the bounds of the normal common things that I rattled off, just to make your essay questionnaire just a little bit more interesting. Because interesting, or like helping, anything that helps the committee pause on your application a little bit longer, or just give it a second look anywhere, is always a very, very good idea. So, um, what were they talking about? Yeah. Anyway, so that's how you want to write your essay, and that's what oftentimes people do write in their essays, is those themes. So please don't think about it in terms of like like what's the right answer, because there isn't one. Um, Sometimes if you have a current student that says some things about the school, you can use something that they said directly as like a quote, as an opening to the essay. Um, Quotes are very overdone in like the personal statement world. So like I am cautious to say this, but like at least for your uh, essay questionnaire, that is something that you could do, just because most people are just like, oh, yes, like your school is so great and I want to come. And it is correct, it is great, and you do want to come. It's just that everybody else is writing the exact same thing. So you want about like, if you can give it a longer pause and really think about it, that is a good thing, which is why like I kind of implore that you kind of, instead of going like looking out to find the correct answer, just kind of turn inward first to um, find an answer that might be more true for you, um, is good. So yeah, and oftentimes I see, in terms of like short essay questions, which usually essay questionnaires for schools are not that long. Um, get to the point. Don't be super superfluous. Like, don't beat around the bush and be superfluous. Just put a bunch of fancy words. That kind of writing is actually pretty frowned upon in the U.S. academic world. Um, I obviously don't have experience with this, right? Like going to an English writing class, like I have never been to one myself. Um, But what I gather and hear from a lot of people, especially because our editors are really, really good at like writing and editing, and so I've learned a lot throughout the years working with them. But what I hear a lot is like, just get to the point. Like, don't try to be fancy. Use normal words that um and just get to the point. Don't try to be fancy in your essay questionnaire, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, somebody asks, how do we explain it with the same clarity that's mentioned in the personal statement as there lesser space in supplementals? Sure, yes. Well, there's lesser space in supplementals, but also the questioners are a lot more specific. Like, it actually wouldn't make sense for a school to be like, why do you want to come to our school? And there be like a 5,000 character word limit. Like, writing an entire page for that's just way too much. So I guess what I'm saying right now is exactly the answer to your question. Don't beat around the bush. Be clear. Um, let's say if it was, let's say if I'm trying to talk to you about this new restaurant that I think is great, like, or something like that. I don't want to be like, hey, when you walk in to the right-hand side, you'll see this, and to the left-hand side, you'll see that. And like, it's just too much. You're going around the bush. Like, nobody's interested in hearing those kind of details. But if I talked more about like, oh my gosh, I had a really great server and the food was just phenomenal and the ambience was great. The music wasn't too loud, it wasn't too little, it was just nice. I didn't say a lot of sentences, but it is much more to the point, right? It's just not another example of like beating around, or at least just kind of unclear writing. Well, is would be things like, let's say tea, like, or I just don't have very sophisticated taste buds, but like some teas will be like, oh yeah, we have a hint of this and a hint of that, and I'm just like, okay, it's green tea. Like, it's green tea, just get to the point. Yeah, like this kind of stuff. So you don't want to do that, what I did before. You just want to kind of get to the point. And I say this because before people really learned to write essays in English, and this was certainly me as well, like I was absolutely there too. It's really hard to know what clear writing is and how to get to the point faster. You think you're getting to the point, but most of the times you're not. And I really do think that it's just hard to pick up that skill in a few months of applications. And this is why I am a huge advocate of getting professional help for your applications. Because it's not our expertise. It's not your expertise, and nor should it be. Like, dentists are not good writers. Why should you be a good writer? It's a kind of a different part of your brain that it requires to write versus it requires to do this. Some people are good. Some people are good. It does happen, but that's few and far between, especially for people that were educated outside of the US, because just didn't have exposure for that to this kind of stuff. But yeah, how do we explain it with clarity? If you have like even this question, if I just kind of get a little picky, even this question to me is a little bit vague. Like you said, how do we explain it with the same clarity? Like, what is it? Like, there's anyway. Um, so like my answer can, like I kind of have to guess and be like, okay, like this is what I think you mean by it. But clarity really is like going through that and being like, oh, things like it and this, and like, what did that mean? Like, this is part of proofreading that I know, like somebody as like a really good writer and editor had told me that she does, is she will, like, after she goes through like what's been written, she'll do like a control F or a command F, like, which is like a search function, right? And be like, it, and then she will go through it and be like, okay, is that clear? Because when you write, you're like so immersed in it, you don't even see it. But then you're like, okay, there's way too many its, and like it's just a little bit confusing. And then you'll change the it out to the actual word. Clarity. It comes from a lot of different places. But when you're working with a short essay like this, the first place you really do want to be thinking about is this happens with Captain too, by the way. Same kind of thing. I've been working with an applicant on. I talked to somebody, so this is kind of fresh in my mind. But you know that question, what has changed since your last application? And the person I was talking to had like two or three, I think it was like three things that she could newly add to her experience list. And so it's not a lot of characters she has, but it was plenty of characters to be clear about what it is that she's trying to say here. So, um, what she had written as her first draft was like, uh, it just, the structure was unclear. Like when I read the first sentence, I couldn't really guess what the next thing was. It was just a little like, the writing was just, uh it was I think she just started as like I started to work as like this kind of assistant, and it was just like, okay, whatever, it's fine. But the way we changed that to just make it a little bit more clear and faster for the reader to understand, because this is not like you're not writing a giant essay about your life, right? Like this is like a specific question they want an answer to, so you want them to understand your answer quickly and concisely and easily. You don't want them to have to use their brain a lot. So anyway, the way we changed that is there are three things that I added to my profile this year, and then just went into first, second, and third. Not a huge change at all, but added so much clarity to the for the reader. Like, oh, it's so much easier to grasp if you're just like rattling things out that you did. I started working as a dental assistant. Da, 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 da. Also, I started to volunteer. Da, 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 da. This is like, okay, there's no um there was just no break. Like it was work for the reader to figure out those things, versus like if you structure it that way, like I just said, like, yes, what are the things that you did you add? Like, oh yeah, I did three things and here they are, first, second, and third. And it's just like you can easily check it with your eyes, like first, that second, that, like, okay, that's the main sentence, that's the main sentence. It's very easy to like take the info in, which is what you really want them to do. We want them to take the info because they are not going to spend the brain with. I mean, you're very lucky if you find somebody, if your essay lands in somebody's lap and they're ready to spend the extra mental effort it takes to understand and decipher what you wrote. You're very lucky. Okay, so follow-up question on that, because I kind of pointed that out, was like we state a story or experience and tell them what it taught you, but that's a longer way to state the whole thing. But in supplementals, do we just explain what the lesson learned was and not share the story and background that led to it? Can you give me the example of which supplemental question is leading you to ask this question? Um, but yeah, if you don't always get to tell the whole story, right? About something, and I really do want to know, like, because this is telling me that, Fatih, you're probably kind of agonizing over a question, and you're like, oh, I want to write all this. You have to be concise. That does not necessarily mean you take out the story or experience. That is something that, like I can't say like, okay, yes, because there's a character limit, we just share this the what you learned. Not always, right? Because like we have that character count to play with. So sometimes I'm totally guessing here because I do not know what the question is. I do not know what the character count is, any of that. But sometimes what you can do is you just have to be very, very brief about it. And if the story happens to be already mentioned in the SOP, then you can say, you can kind of reference to that, but you wouldn't do it to the point where you're assuming they read that carefully. You can't do, you really shouldn't do. But you can just kind of mention like, I shared this experience in the SOP as well, but um, whatever the experience was, And then from here, I learned, but that does not necessarily mean that you have to share every single detail about that. This is something that I find a lot with applicants, is that you're wordy. You're very wordy. And again, American academics don't like the wordiness, not the nerdiness, the wordiness. You're wordy in talking, you're wordy in your essays. I and like when I notice this a lot is like when I do consulting sessions for sometimes like to brainstorm like how to present some stuff, whatever. I talk to applicants about all kinds of stuff, but when I'm talking to them, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to understand let's just say I'm really trying to understand because I'm not you, right? You're the person that lived your life, and now you are trying to consult me in how to present this part of your life in whatever light, right? And now I have to understand a little sliver of your life experience to be able to help you. So I'll ask questions um, about it, and I get so much detail that I didn't need that I'm just like, okay, I'm waiting for my answer that I really need. Like I have to fish out the answer that I really am looking for. Like Fatty, I really, really challenge you to whatever question it is that you're working toward. You really shouldn't be thinking it in terms of, okay, like you really shouldn't be. I'm still guessing because I don't know what you're working through, but you really shouldn't be guessing like, or like, shouldn't have to select. Do I have to write the story? And, like, because of the character count, do I just write the conclusion? Probably not. Probably the answer is you write the short version of the story and your short version of the learnings instead of the long version of your story and the long version of your learnings. Because if you just write the learnings, it often just becomes a very generic, stale kind of situation and very uninteresting to read. So, whatever story or thing there is to go along with it, you do want to write it. But again, that's kind of probably where you could get some help if you can. Um, can you suggest some idea to answer this supplemental question? In your own words, what is currently the greatest challenge or challenges to the dental profession? Okay, so yes, this question gets a lot of people um, agonizing. Okay, let me just read your next question first. What does the quote, "We are better when we are equal," mean to you? What does that mean? We are better. So those kinds of questions are trying to figure out what internal state is going on with you, right? Like what's going on, or like how does your thought process work, or like it's not an unreasonable question. Like when they are accepting current dentists from abroad to join their dental program again, what do they think the greatest challenge to the dental profession is it's difficult, thought provoking, but it is a fair kind of question. So it depends. I can't tell you how to think about this. I have to ask you, what do you think is the a challenge? I have helped many candidates through this question, but I never tell them this is how you should answer it because that doesn't exist. But some people have, so like um when when you're presented with this question, I guess my first question to you is like, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Often in the American setting, it is either like the rural area, people over there not having access, or like the discrepancy in like the access to not just access to care, but the dental IQ, like the inner city, like the city people versus or like people with higher level education or the white collar people versus the blue collar people versus like people that live in the middle of nowhere that has like no dentist in sight, this kind of thing. Or like they will sometimes bring in like insurance, whatever. And so there are several different angles that can be taken from this. Um, and not one way is right or wrong, but let's say if I was sitting down with you, I probably would first ask you what's the first thing that comes to your mind, and we would talk from there and find an angle that way. Um, yeah, so those are some things that you can think about. And then there are other things too, like the entire world, like the US overall, even though sure there's like an access to care issues in the US, but like abroad oftentimes in many other countries, like US is still is it's pretty good, right? So that kind of stuff as well. Can I write? I see patient not treat as good as they should be when they come to the office at the beginning. What do you mean? I don't even understand this sentence. But you have to be very cautious before you criticize what has happened at a dental office, at an American dental office. Um, I'm not sure if that's what you're asking. I see patient not treat as good as they should be when they come to the office at the beginning. What do you mean? When they come to the office as a new patient, they're not treated well? And by you mean dentally or humanly? This is a good example of a vague, unclear sentence. I'm sorry. I have but this is like I can't decipher what you actually really mean from this. So feel free to elaborate. But I do see this sometimes where um, applicants would not all dentists are created equal, and not all dental offices are created equal, right? And sometimes some offices really um, don't do things the best way possible. Any profession, right? Dentistry is no exception. Um, but I probably would hesitate to bring this kind of issue up. Over treatment. Dentists try to do implants instead of fillings. Okay. Yeah, so this is like an example of you're looking at a dentist and you are having a serious disagreement with the dentist's approach, right? Overtreatment can certainly be an issue. I'm not trying to underplay that at all. Um, you see that as a trend. Uh, I really would need to talk to you before. Van, are you our client, Van? Like, are you the Van I'm thinking you are? If you are that Van that I think you are, then email me, please. We need to talk about this in a lot more depth. I cannot just say yes or no to this. Because if you are saying that you see this as a trend, like, okay, email me. Or feel free to write it up and send it to me so that I can review it. If you are going to criticize an American dentist, it has to be done so tactfully, so very tactfully. You can't if it is not done tactfully, you're gonna be written off completely, like, no question. Because it's kinda like, "Well, who are you to, what do you know?" Like, because the problem is you have not proven yourself to anybody yet in their eyes. Let's say if you were a graduate, and you say, yes, I see overtreatment as an issue, uh, then yes, now you can actually have a conversation, because you just don't have the chops for them to take that and seriously consider your opinion as a professional opinion. Does that make sense? Because you're not licensed in the US. Um, but what you can do if you want to write up something like that is then I would go and find studies on percentage of overtreatment, or there are those studies in like that are out there, so you can search for them. Studies that basically talk about uh percentage of, yeah, like, and the sample size is usually not giantly huge, because like who has the time to go through all of the radiographs and like all of this stuff, but you would really need to back it up with something like that, studies, not just, I think this was not okay. And honestly, you want to, yeah, like it's just, this is a very difficult situation. But really, like, if you see that, you might want to change where you're working. Um, and I don't say this lightly, but you don't really want to spend your time at an office that's just over treating patients like that. You know what I mean? It's just not a place where there's much for you to learn or gain or much of anything. Um, yeah. But yeah, be cautious of that. So yes. And we are better when we are equal. What does that mean to me? We're better when we're equal can mean, well, at least what comes to my mind when I hear that is not having such a hierarchical structure can lead to better results. Like, um, it's kind of a proponent of like the same kind of thing as like diversity is good, like this kind of situation. It's very sounds very similar to me. We're better when we're equal. So because if we're not equal and somebody can't speak their mind or whatever, then brain power and ideas can go to waste. Which is why like a lot of like hip big companies or just newer, hipper companies have a flat company structure and try to keep it that way, or have an easy way for even the person at the bottom to reach people at the top without having to go through so much red tape. Um, like Toyota cars, they say um, Toyota cars are pretty well known for its quality, right? For not breaking and stuff. The way they improved that was, and then kind of achieved something like that was by, or I mean, I'm sure there were lots of things that they did, but one of the things that they did is in the factory, they installed all these like buttons, a one press button that anybody could push to stop the entire conveyor belt or whatever it was of production. And what it was the people working at the factory were told to press it when they see an issue that needed to be fixed. And they did, because and so by fixing little issues that were annoying to the workers or holding them back or whatever, they made the production so efficient and accurate that so not only did they like save a lot of money because they're just not wasting money like spending a bunch of time doing wasteful things or whatever, uh, but also everything became more accurate, and so there were less mistakes in the whole production. And so yeah, the cars just started to last a lot longer. So those are the kind of things where if you flatten the structure of an organization, um, or whatever, like you would get a good result from that. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that I would think about. But yeah. So there are situations that are can be like what Van brought up in terms of like I'm assuming from what she said that she's maybe in an office where she disagrees with a dentist. She doesn't think that the dentist is providing the best of care, and she thinks that dentist is overtreating. And those offices most certainly exist. I know they exist for sure. I had a good friend that interviewed in an office, and the dentist left in the middle of the interview and never came back to see him after the dentist had asked him like how he approaches restorations, and he was just like, well, like you do the restoration. The dentist basically said like, no, wrong, because in the long term most restorations will turn into a root canal, so you just want to do a root canal from the beginning. And he was just like, I disagree with you. And the dentist kind of left him in the room hanging and never to come back in the middle. That's so weird, right? But yeah, there are those people. But I also do think that there are more people that are not like that than there are like that. There are like little shades of gray, of course, in terms of like at what point do you recommend a extraction and implant versus at what point do you recommend a full coverage crown versus what point is it direct restoration, like this. There are like zones where it could either be a large filling or a crown, like this kind of thing. And some people would go or lean more towards this or that way. But the whole thing of what should be a restoration being an implant is such a big jump that I'm a little concerned on how it can be presented um, without coming across too, I shouldn't say arrogant, but kind of, it's like there are things that when the line is walked very well, because this is a very like it's a delicate situation we're trying to discuss, right? In those situations, there is a line that can be walked, and if you do it well, it can be extremely good. It can become a very, very good essay. But if you do it wrong, not very good, it's the complete opposite direction. Like you just totally bombed it. Like you lost your chance kind of thing. So if you do that well, it will, let's say, do you much more good than if you just wrote about, oh, I see the biggest uh, problem to be the axis of care. Like a lot of people, other people are writing about that, right? But it just is so very delicate. And anyway, so okay. Another question. For questions where they ask for numbers of restorations done, if we don't remember the exact numbers, what should be the answer? Then you're gonna have to guess. You'll be like, okay, because nobody remembers exactly how many, but and they're not asking for the exact number because, like, seriously, who remembers that and how? But it would be more like, okay, while I was in my internship, I was in restorative dentistry for maybe like 2 months, and probably in an average day, I would have done 3 restorations. So Monday through Friday, that's 15. Just this kind of approximate math is what you need to do. Also, when asked about describe top procedure, how should we answer that? Like, give me the entire question. What do you mean by describe top procedure? Like, do you mean describe your most memorable procedure, or describe the procedure that you've done the most, or describe your favorite procedure? What is this exact question? Because I can't answer that without that. And if anybody else has any other questions, feel free to put it in the chat box. We are almost at the top of the hour, but I can hang around for a few more minutes. And this is usually the time of the year where most people are, or I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people are done with their SOP and CV, and there's cramming to finish the supplemental essay questionnaires. Please describe your top endo fixed procedures. Just that's the verbiage used, top. Your top endo slash fixed procedures. I think in this case, because the word top is up for interpretation, right? It can mean like because it's not a word with just like one interpretation. Like it is a very uh, it's a kind of a vague term. So you can take it either like this, like my most frequently done, or like the in terms of volume, the procedure I've done the most is you can go like that, or you could go like the procedure I like the most, like my first and personal favorite procedure is, and you can take it like that. I would take one of the two routes. Um, so maybe you can take the first route. I mean, anybody can take the second route, but I would only take the first route if you have that kind of like enough experience to back it up in terms of like the number of cases you've done, kind of thing. So yep. All right. That is all. Thank you for being here. And by the way, I think if you have, I sent this out in an email as well, but if you have any workshop topics that you would like to see me talk about, you can either email me or just put it in the chat box right now. I am certainly looking for inspiration. Because when I hold these sessions, I do want to hold session on things that you want to hear about. Okay, one more question. If we don't have the research experience, then what should we answer regarding research experience? Or like in which topic do you want to do research? Okay, so if it is a question about what kind of research experience do you have, like past tense, then you don't. Um, I know that when I was applying, I also, because I don't have any research experience, and those were just um, at this time I don't have research experience, but I would like to do it, something more like that. Um, because you just don't have what you don't have, and it already shows in your CV. So it is what it is. I wouldn't dwell on that too much. What topic would you like to do research on? However, I would approach that one differently. Even if you don't have any research experience, so think about it. What would you like to do? Like, I don't know. Like, what's your goal? That's where I would first start. Is what's in your candidacy? Where are you saying you are headed? Are you saying you want to head and be a general dentist, or are you saying you want to be headed in the direction of being a specialist of some kind? If it's a specialty, then I would probably choose a topic within that specialty. If it's general dentistry, then I would choose a topic within general dentistry. And there's no right or wrong here, right? Like the dental field needs research in all different disciplines and areas and topics and subjects. It's really is a personal question, like what do you want to do research, and it's asking about your interests. So think about it. Like if you could just do research, and nobody's going to hold you to like, oh, you said you're going to do that research, you need to do it. Like, no, this is just for application, so don't even worry about that. But like just think about what your interest is. And I would say that, and I'll just look up like what kind of research has already been done in that area, and just go from there. Where do I send my documents for grammar and flow check if I already paid for it? What you paid for is to be completely edited. So whoever your editor is, that grammar and flow should be fine. Oh, you emailed us, right? Okay. Yes, we'll get back to you on that. Yeah, but you can always just email stuff into mail@internationaldentistcentral.com. Like, so if you're like, okay, I need to send in documents, just send it into mail@internationaldentistcentral.com and we can always help. Okie dokie. So that is all for tonight. Thank you all for spending the hour with me and for asking questions and not making me feel by myself. I appreciate that. And really, if you have anything that you would like me to talk about, let me know. And yeah, I had a good hour. And I don't think we will go live next weekend, but perhaps the week after. So, anyhow, just stay tuned for our email for the next one. And best of luck for in your applications if you are still working on them. It really is time to get them in like ASAP. So, yeah. All right. Have a good night. Bye.